Are you ready to learn the truth about surviving in the cold night rain? This harsh scenario erases all familiar urban skills and leaves a person completely defenseless against the fury of the elements. A normal walk in nature can suddenly turn into a real test due to a sharp change in temperature. Wrong and hasty decisions at such a critical moment only accelerate the rapid loss of precious internal heat. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the ancient indigenous peoples of North America successfully coped with icy downpours for centuries. What if I told you that everything you believed about modern everyday clothing is not true? People are accustomed to completely trusting thick fabrics in the comfortable conditions of a warm and dry city. Many novice travelers set off on long journeys wearing ordinary cotton or cheap synthetic clothing. When heavily wet by a nighttime downpour, this familiar material begins to work aggressively against the wearer. The fibers of such fabric instantly absorb cold moisture from the damp environment. Continuing to move actively in a soaked jacket is the traveler's first serious mistake. The night wind greatly intensifies the cooling effect and penetrates to the bone. Every drop of water on the surface of the fabric acts as an ideal conductor of the surrounding cold. The person begins to feel intense and uncontrollable shivering throughout their body. This is a completely natural protective reaction of the body to a rapid drop in internal temperature. Muscle shivering alone is not enough to compensate for the enormous constant loss of energy. The weight of wet clothing increases significantly and puts additional strain on the muscles. Fatigue builds up much faster, depriving the person of their last reserves for generating heat. People often ignore the very first signs of wet clothing in the hope that the rain will soon end. They continue on their way and allow water to soak through to the deepest layers of their equipment. Delaying active measures to protect against moisture leads to irreversible cooling of the entire body. When clothes get wet to the core, it becomes extremely difficult to restore temperature balance. Timely prevention of getting wet is the main rule for prolonged outdoor activities. Ordinary thick cotton demonstrates the worst heat retention performance in the humid conditions of the forest. The fibers of this plant material retain absorbed water with incredible natural persistence. It is simply physically impossible to dry such an item in conditions of incessant rain without a strong source of heat. The heat of the human body alone is completely insufficient to evaporate such a huge volume of water. There is a constant and continuous leakage of precious energy into the cold night air. Even wearing several layers of wet clothing does not provide any noticeable protection from the elements. They simply turn into an even thicker and heavier wet mass on the shoulders. The cold bridge between the external environment and the skin remains completely unbroken and stable. The core body temperature begins to slowly and imperceptibly drop under the influence of dampness. The ability to soberly assess the situation is greatly dulled against the background of general hypothermia. Attempts to wring out wet clothes directly under the incessant rain do not bring any positive results. The fabric is instantly saturated with a new portion of ice-cold water immediately after being put on. A person is completely defenseless against the wind during this useless process. Such manipulations only sharply accelerate the overall loss of heat in open spaces. The best solution is always to prevent your clothes from getting deeply wet in the first place. Even the most technologically advanced modern jackets sometimes succumb to the onslaught of a prolonged autumn storm. Understanding the basic physics of heat exchange helps to avoid fatal decisions far from civilization. Knowing the characteristics of different materials saves you from a lot of problems during long trips. We're really interested in hearing your thoughts on this. What do you think about the reliability of modern fabrics in such extreme conditions? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the ancient masters of creating truly waterproof equipment. The indigenous peoples of the Northeast used a unique technology for deep processing of durable natural materials. They took thick, natural leather and subjected it to prolonged cold smoking over smoldering coals. Thick wood smoke penetrated deep into the pores of the material and permanently changed its internal structure. Such thorough processing made their items incredibly resistant to constant exposure to moisture. The fat layer created an additional and completely insurmountable barrier to water flow. Water simply could not penetrate through such combined protection to the inner layers of the equipment. This allowed warriors and hunters to keep their bodies dry in all weather conditions. Particular attention was always paid to the seams and joints of various clothing items. Native American craftswomen used special threads that swelled slightly at the slightest contact with moisture. The swollen threads completely sealed the tiny holes left by bone needles in the material. The joints were additionally coated with thick resins for absolute reliability and durability. The entire structure was transformed into a single impervious armor against the icy wind and rain. Such equipment required constant care and regular renewal of the protective resin layer. During long stops, people always dried their belongings and applied fresh impregnation. This continuous work ensured their survival in the harsh conditions of the wild. Clothes were passed down from generation to generation and served for many years thanks to such careful treatment. The natural membrane worked flawlessly and did not depend on complex factory production technologies. The lower layers of clothing were also made from specially prepared soft and warm materials. They excellently wick away natural body moisture and maintain an optimal microclimate inside the suit. The combination of a breathable inner layer and a waterproof outer barrier produced amazing results. Heat was reliably retained inside, while the cold remained outside this protective cocoon. A similar principle of layering is used today in the creation of the best sports equipment. The Indians understood perfectly well the difference between prolonged exposure to rain and a short downpour. For short trips, they used light capes made of thick leaves or tree bark. Such temporary raincoats were easy to take off after the rain stopped and did not weigh down the main load. The main processed clothing was used specifically for prolonged night storms and long journeys. The competent distribution of resources helped them maintain high mobility in the vast forests. The ability to stay dry directly affected the success of any long expedition or hike. A dry person could calmly set up camp, build a fire, and prepare food for the tribe. A wet traveler spent all of their meager strength solely on fighting the piercing cold. The technology of creating the right clothing was the foundation for the survival of entire peoples of North America. Their knowledge was accumulated over centuries and tested by the most ruthless climatic trials. Modern synthetic membranes largely replicate this ancient principle of water protection. They also repel external moisture and allow the body to breathe through microscopic pores. However, ancient natural materials were much more durable and resistant to sparks from a fire. Smoke-treated leather did not melt from an accidental ember, unlike thin nylon. This reliability was critical for people whose lives depended on open fire. The Iroquois and Great Plains tribes perfected these reliable methods of protection from moisture over centuries. Their unique clothing remained completely dry inside even after hours of walking in heavy rain. Natural materials worked as an ideal protective system long before its official discovery. Are you interested in finding out if your ancestors used similar methods to treat their belongings? In the next chapter, you will learn why trying to shelter from the rain in a cozy hollow can turn into a disaster. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in choosing the right place to spend the night. A tired traveler in the cold rain always instinctively looks for visual depressions in complex terrain. Various lowlands and deep ravines seem to be excellent natural protection from the piercing wind. At first glance, such hidden places seem the safest and most attractive. It is this visual illusion of comfort that leads to catastrophic heat loss at night. Huge puddles invisible in the dark form right where the traveler plans to spend the night. A person who sets up camp in a low-lying area actually finds themselves inside a large cold bath. The wet ground begins to rapidly draw heat from the body of the resting tourist. The level of air humidity in such depressions always reaches its maximum limits. A thick, cold fog envelops the temporary shelter and penetrates through clothing. Breathing in such an atmosphere saturated with icy moisture becomes physically difficult and uncomfortable. Moisture actively settles on sleeping bags and personal belongings, completely depriving them of their thermal insulation properties. Any attempt to warm up in such a damp bag is doomed to complete failure. The absence of even the slightest air movement in the lowlands exacerbates the overall negative situation. A light breeze on the hill could dry out a wet tent or outer clothing a little. In a ravine, however, the dampness stagnates and creates the effect of a cold, damp cellar around a person. In such conditions, it is impossible to dry even small items or kindling for a future fire. A freezing traveler finds himself in a hopeless situation because of a single mistake in orientation. Building a fire in a waterlogged lowland becomes an incredibly difficult and exhausting task. Thick smoke does not rise but accumulates right where you are standing, stinging your eyes. The lack of normal draft prevents the flames from reaching the necessary temperature. The cold, wet ground constantly cools the base of the fire that has been so painstakingly built. Most of the time is spent trying to keep the weak, smoldering fire going. Many people only realize their fatal mistake late at night, when the cold becomes unbearable. It is extremely difficult to pack up camp and move to another location in complete darkness and rain. Fatigue and shivering restrict movement, making it impossible to perform active physical actions. A person has to endure until morning, risking serious hypothermia every minute. This night turns into the longest and most painful test of endurance. Proper analysis of the surrounding area requires calmness and a clear understanding of the laws of nature. It is necessary to always pay attention to the traces of dried streams and the nature of the vegetation at the bottom of ravines. Bright green, moisture-loving grass in lowlands is a sure sign of a permanent accumulation of water. Avoiding such places should become an automatic habit for anyone in the wild. Height and dryness are your main allies in the fight to stay warm. Consciously rejecting the apparent comfort of lowlands requires a certain psychological effort of will. The wind on a small hill can be frightening in its strength, but it does not carry hidden dampness. A properly set up shelter on high ground will always provide a more comfortable microclimate. The ground there will remain dry, and the cold air will simply flow down, bypassing your camp. This basic survival strategy works flawlessly in all geographical latitudes. Water always defeats the unprepared traveler due to its enormous natural heat capacity. The ground beneath your feet in a low-lying area acts like a huge ice sponge, constantly absorbing your strength. Being in such a place becomes simply unbearable due to the combination of high humidity and cold. Correct analysis of the terrain is an absolute guarantee of maintaining a normal body temperature. Like this video if you have also ever made a mistake when choosing a place to camp. The secret, carefully passed down from generation to generation, lies in the correct positioning of the dwelling. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains never set up their camps at the bottom of deep ravines. They always carefully chose small hills with good natural drainage for their camps. This advantageous position allowed powerful streams of rainwater to flow unhindered down the slope. The soil around their dwellings remained relatively dense and dry even during heavy rains. The air on these hills constantly circulated, preventing destructive dampness from stagnating around the camp. A light breeze quickly dried the outer shells of their traditional tents after the rain stopped. When setting up teepees on the plains, a small drainage trench was always dug around the base. This simple and ingenious ditch diverted water flowing from the dome away from the entrance to the dwelling. The inner area remained completely protected from sudden puddles and mud flows. People could sleep peacefully on dry ground while a cold night storm raged outside. The geometry of the structure and the terrain worked in perfect tandem to protect people. The frame of the teepee, made of long wooden poles, served as an excellent basis for creating a reliable steep dome. The angle of the walls was calculated so that water would roll down at maximum speed. Raindrops simply did not have time to seep through the dense material of the tent's outer covering. This architectural solution was an example of a perfect understanding of the laws of gravity and hydrodynamics. The dwelling was transformed into an impregnable fortress, reflecting any blows from the water element. Inside the teepee, a special microclimate was always maintained thanks to the clever distribution of temperature zones. Cold air coming in from below was heated by the central hearth and rose to the top of the dome. This constant draft provided a supply of fresh oxygen and removed excess moisture from the room. The inner slopes further protected sleeping people from drafts and condensation drops. The complex ventilation system worked flawlessly even when the external valves were completely closed. Tribes always took into account the structure of the soil itself when choosing a place for their temporary camp. They avoided clayey areas, which absorb water very slowly and quickly turn into mud. Preference was always given to sandy or rocky soils that allowed moisture to pass through like a sieve. On such soil, puddles did not form even after several days of continuous rain. This ensured cleanliness and order throughout the vast Indian camp. Their knowledge of the terrain allowed them to unerringly find ideal places for camp in complete darkness. Experienced trackers could determine the slope and density of the soil under a layer of wet grass with their feet. They trusted their senses much more than the deceptive visual image of the nighttime terrain. This ability to read the land saved entire tribes from destruction during sudden floods. Their harmony with nature was based on a deep respect for its harsh laws. Many modern tents are inferior to traditional teepees in terms of drainage and ventilation. The flat bottom of a modern tent often turns into a pool at the slightest mistake in choosing a location. The lack of an internal open hearth deprives tourists of the opportunity to quickly dry their belongings. Ancient structures were much better suited for long-term living in wild weather conditions. They combine simplicity of form with the highest efficiency of protection from precipitation. Choosing the right location is the first and most important step in protecting yourself from hypothermia. Even the most perfect shelter will not save you if it is set up in the middle of a cold swamp. Have you ever noticed how water instantly collects in low-lying areas after rain? Have you ever thought about how much the terrain affects the ambient air temperature? In the next chapter, you will learn what fatal mistake with your own clothing deprives a traveler of their last strength. The third common and extremely dangerous mistake is related to the natural human instinct to curl up into a ball. In the cold night rain, the traveler begins to unconsciously and tightly wrap their arms around their shoulders. People press all the wet layers of their upper and lower clothing as tightly as possible against their bodies. This action seems to the brain to be the most logical way to preserve the remaining internal heat. In practice, this leads to a completely opposite and extremely negative result for the body. Wet fabric pressed tightly against the skin instantly displaces all the protective air layer. Ordinary still air is one of the best natural insulators in the environment. Water, on the contrary, has enormous thermal conductivity and instantly takes energy away from any heated object. By pressing a wet jacket to their chest, people destroy the last barrier against the cold with their own hands. Ice-cold water comes into direct and unhindered contact with the surface of the heated body. The lack of even minimal ventilation prevents the fabric from drying out even slightly from the natural heat of the body. The moisture trapped inside continues to circulate between the skin and the icy environment outside. This creates the effect of a constant cold compress that cannot be removed or warmed up. The traveler finds themselves trapped by their own reflexes, exacerbating an already difficult situation. The fear of freezing causes them to huddle even more, accelerating the inevitable process of hypothermia. Attempts to hide one's face deep in the wet collar of a jacket also lead to disastrous consequences. Warm, moist, exhaled air instantly settles as condensation on the cold fabric of the clothing. This additional portion of water soaks the collar and drips down the neck and chest in icy drops. Breathing becomes difficult, and a feeling of panic gradually increases with each passing minute. The face freezes even more from constant contact with wet and cold material. Many people in this situation freeze in one place, afraid to move and let in the cold air. Stopping movement completely stops the active production of heat by the muscles of a tired body. The heart begins to beat less frequently, trying to conserve the remaining rapidly dwindling energy. Without movement, freezing occurs several times faster, even if the person is in shelter. Stiffness is the most formidable enemy in low nighttime temperatures. Changing this instinctive posture requires considerable willpower from a freezing person. The brain sends alarm signals, demanding maximum heat conservation by physically compressing the body. Understanding the physics of heat exchange must prevail over ancient animal survival instincts. It is necessary to force oneself to relax the shoulders and pull the wet fabric away from the skin. Creating even a minimal air gap is a critical step toward survival. Even a millimeter of air between the body and an icy jacket can significantly slow down the freezing process. This tiny barrier interrupts the direct transfer of heat to the water and gives the body a little respite. Straightening the shoulders allows normal blood circulation and deep, calm breathing to be restored. The person regains the ability to think clearly and make appropriate decisions in a difficult situation. Control over one's own body becomes the main weapon in the fight against the raging elements. Remaining in a static position in tight, wet clothing only accelerates critical cooling. Water freely takes precious energy from a body completely deprived of air protection. Prolonged exposure in such a hunched position inevitably leads to severe muscle exhaustion. The body wastes its internal reserves fighting against the endless ice compress. A person finds themselves in a dangerous trap of their own instinctive and ill-considered actions. What they found in the old archives is striking in its ingenious and incredible simplicity. The indigenous peoples of the subarctic and plains used a completely different approach to insulating their bodies. They understood perfectly well the vital importance of maintaining airspace between the layers of their clothing. Their clothes were always sewn with a very loose fit and never restricted natural human movement. During heavy night rains, they never pulled their leather capes too tightly. The person's skin remained completely dry, which prevented rapid cooling from internal moisture. When the moss got wet, it could be easily removed and replaced with a new dry portion from the supply. This simple modular system allowed comfort to be maintained in all weather conditions for a long time. The loose fit of traditional clothing provided excellent internal ventilation during active movement. Excess heat and moisture freely escaped through the wide sleeves and collar of the shirt. The body did not overheat or sweat, which is critical for preventing hypothermia at rest. The Indians regulated their body temperature simply by adjusting the tightness of the ties on their clothing. This dynamic heat exchange system was superior to many modern static types of equipment. Loose clothing also allowed blood to circulate freely throughout the body's vessels. Hands and feet remained warm thanks to a steady supply of hot blood from the internal organs. The absence of constricting elastic bands and tight belts prevented numbness in the limbs in severe cold. Warriors retained full sensitivity in their fingers, which was necessary for archery. Freedom of movement ensured quick reactions in dangerous situations while hunting. The skins of small furry animals were often used for additional warmth. They were placed with the fur inside in the most vulnerable areas, such as the lower back and neck. The soft pile created another layer of air, which was incredibly pleasant and warm against the skin. This localized insulation did not weigh down the overall design of the clothing, but had an excellent effect. People could individually adjust their equipment to the specific temperature conditions of the night. Native American women were true masters at creating such complex, multi-layered systems. They knew exactly where to make loose fabric overlaps and where to reinforce the structure with seams. Every detail of their clothing was thought out to the smallest detail and performed a specific protective function. Embroidery and decorations often served not only as decoration, but also as additional sealing of the material. This knowledge was passed down from mothers to daughters over many hundreds of years of tribal existence. The principle of maintaining an air layer is also relevant for modern extreme tourism enthusiasts. A jacket that is too tight or boots that are laced too tightly will inevitably lead to rapid freezing. Air is your most reliable and free ally in the fight against any weather on the planet. The ability to properly manage this air inside clothing distinguishes an experienced traveler from a novice. Ancient tribes mastered this art to perfection without factory thermometers. A layer of dry grass created an absolutely insurmountable barrier to the icy outside air. Excess accumulated moisture gradually and safely evaporated without causing any harm to the body. People retained complete freedom of movement and could continue to actively set up their camp. This method made it possible to comfortably endure even the longest and harshest autumn storms. Do you think it is difficult to find suitable dry grass during heavy night rain? In the next chapter, you will learn why building a fire directly on wet ground is a fatal mistake. The fourth critical mistake is made when trying to quickly build a life-saving warming fire. A tired and frozen traveler hastily throws the collected thin branches directly onto the wet, soggy ground. The cold and moisture-saturated soil instantly begins to absorb any heat released by the kindling. Under the influence of temperature, moisture from the ground rises and mercilessly extinguishes the weak flame that is just beginning to form. All the enormous efforts to create a vital source of heat are reduced to absolute zero. The absence of light from an open fire in the pitch darkness of night intensifies the feeling of deep isolation. Morale drops with every minute spent in the completely dark, cold, wet forest. The inability to boil a mug of hot water deprives the body of the chance to quickly regain its strength. Without hot drinks and warmth, the process of hypothermia enters its most dangerous and rapid phase. An extinguished fire often becomes that very point of no return in an extreme situation. Improper preparation of the fire site reveals a complete lack of basic survival skills. Even the driest resinous firewood will refuse to burn in a deep puddle of icy water. Fire demands respect and strict adherence to the rules for its proper use in difficult conditions. Attempts to cheat the laws of physics always end in defeat in the face of harsh nature. The laws of thermodynamics work flawlessly and make no allowances for fatigue or severe stress. Damp soil also blocks the necessary oxygen from reaching the bottom of the stacked fire. For a bright burn, air must flow freely to the fire from all sides, including the bottom. Dirt firmly cements the branches together, depriving the flame of the air draft necessary for life. Fire suffocates as quickly as a person suffocates without a supply of fresh air. Proper fire building begins long before striking a match on a wet box. Experienced trackers never neglect thorough preparation of the site for their future fire. They know that a few minutes spent on the foundation will save hours of torment in the dark. Fire is a living organism that requires care and the right comfortable environment to grow. To leave it to die on wet ground is to sign your own death warrant on this freezing night. This mistake has cost the health of thousands of inexperienced tourists around the world. Without a reliable and dry foundation, any fire is doomed to quickly and inevitably die out. Attempts to fan the flames on wet, soggy mud only result in thick, acrid smoke. A person wastes their last strength, crawling unsuccessfully on their knees in a cold, icy puddle. Their body temperature continues to drop steadily due to the complete lack of an external heat source. Water confidently defeats the weak fire, thanks to its enormous difference in natural heat capacity. Native Americans solved this difficult problem by creating a completely reliable foundation for the hearth. The peoples of the humid forest zone never placed kindling directly on the wet, icy ground. They always built a special raised platform out of thick, dry branches or flat stones. This sturdy wooden or stone platform reliably insulated the future fire from the cold, damp ground. A protective barrier was created, preventing moisture from rising and extinguishing the timid flame. The logs were laid in a dense and even layer, creating a completely dry and elevated platform. For reliability, the Indians often made the platform from several intersecting layers of thick wood. The smallest and driest materials for the initial kindling were placed on this solid foundation. The heat from the blazing fire did not escape into the ground, but was reflected from the upper logs of the foundation. This allowed the flames to rapidly gain strength even under drizzling, freezing rain. A platform of branches provided ideal air circulation at the very bottom of the blazing hearth. Oxygen flowed freely between the logs, fanning the coals to a bright white glow. This magnificent natural draft prevented the fire from suffocating in the thick smoke of its own fumes. The fire roared and blazed, radiating powerful, life-saving heat in all directions from its center. People could enjoy the heat while staying at a safe distance from the wet, soggy ground. To protect the fire from heavy rain, a small canopy was constructed from green fir branches. This improvised umbrella prevented large cold drops from breaking the fragile hot coals. The fire was completely protected on all sides, from the wet ground and from the rain pouring from the sky. In such a cozy nest, the flames felt completely safe and gave their warmth to people. Knowledge of these subtleties allowed tribes to survive in conditions of endless autumn rains. The secret was to treat the process of building a fire as if it were building a house. Every house must have a strong, dry foundation and reliable protection in the form of a roof. A fire built according to these architectural rules will never let its creator down in a difficult moment. Preparing a good site takes time, but this investment pays off handsomely in the form of stable heat. Native American children learn this art from the earliest years of their harsh, nomadic life. This method is completely universal and works in any conditions, whether in a swamp or a snow-covered forest. Raising the heat source above the aggressive cold environment is the key to successfully heating the camp. Modern travelers have adopted this invaluable experience and actively use it in their long expeditions. The ability to build a fire in a swamp or deep snow is considered a sign of the highest skill of a tourist. Ancient knowledge continues to save lives, even in our high-tech, enlightened age. The stones around the fire accumulated heat and slowly released it into the surrounding space of the camp. People could calmly dry their wet clothes without fear of the flames suddenly dying out. Air flowed freely to the base of the fire, ensuring an even and very bright burn. The platform of dry branches gradually burned through, but managed to completely dry the ground beneath it. Ancient knowledge made it possible to control the powerful element of fire, even in pouring freezing rain. The fifth and very common mistake is to completely ignore the direction of the icy night wind. Many people rush to build their temporary shelters without analyzing the movement of air masses at all. They pull up canvas tents or build shelters from branches in a random and chaotic manner. As a result, the cold and piercing wind blows unhindered right into their temporary dwelling. Rain at an acute angle floods all hidden belongings and carefully prepared sleeping places. The expected protective shelter instantly turns into a real wind tunnel, blowing away all the heat. The airflow inside such an incorrectly oriented shelter can be even stronger than an open space. The wind swirls under the canopy, creating a zone of constant cooling around the freezing traveler. The tent flaps loudly in the wind, preventing sleep and creating additional psychological stress. The person finds themselves in the epicenter of a small local hurricane that they themselves have artificially created. The body cannot cope with the constant heat loss and conditions of strong, icy drafts. The airflow continuously strips away the thinnest layer of warm air from the surface of human skin. The wind chill effect can lower the perceived temperature by 10 degrees below the actual thermometer reading. The traveler begins to freeze twice as fast while under the seemingly reliable roof of their shelter. All energy is spent on a fruitless struggle against the constantly changing flows of icy air. Attempts to build a fire in such an aerodynamic trap are also doomed to quick and guaranteed failure. Strong gusts of wind simply blow out the flames, preventing them from burning normally and steadily. Sparks fly in all directions, posing a serious fire hazard to sleeping bags and dry clothes. The smoke constantly changes direction, blinding people and preventing them from breathing normally. As a result, the fire does not provide the expected warmth, but only adds a host of new problems. Proper installation of a windscreen is a critical task when setting up any forest camp. The screen must be completely opaque and directed precisely toward the main cold air currents. It should reflect the wind, causing it to smoothly bypass your shelter on both sides. Behind such a screen, an aerodynamic calm zone is formed where you can safely build a life-saving fire. The air in this calm zone heats up quickly and creates a comfortable microclimate for rest. Ignoring the windrows often happens due to severe fatigue or simply rushing before nightfall. A person just wants to hide from the rain as quickly as possible without thinking about the long-term consequences of their actions. They choose a visually attractive place among the trees without checking the direction of the heavy clouds. This momentary weakness turns into hours of nighttime torment from the piercing, icy cold. Nature does not forgive haste and always severely punishes a frivolous attitude towards its rules. An experienced traveler always spends a couple of minutes carefully studying the behavior of the wind in a given area. He looks at the bends in the tree branches and the direction of flight of rare nightbirds. He throws a handful of dry grass to see exactly where the main flow of cold air is directed. These simple actions allow them to choose the ideal location for setting up their protective tent. Their camp always stands with its back to the weather, like an impregnable fortress reflecting the attacks of the elements. Incorrect orientation of the tent entrance also leads to a huge amount of water getting inside. By opening the canopy toward the wind, you voluntarily let the rain fall directly onto your dry sleeping bag. The entrance should always be on the leeward side to ensure safe access to the shelter. This rule applies to all types of temporary dwellings in all climatic zones of our planet. Aerodynamics is no less important for survival than knowing how to build a warm fire. Constant night drafts inside the shelter instantly negate all the thermal insulation of dry clothes. A person is completely defenseless against the strong and icy gusts of a fierce night storm. Each new powerful wave of cold air rapidly takes away the precious energy of a tired body. The absence of a solid protective wall on the windward side makes any shelter completely useless. In such harsh conditions, it is impossible to warm up normally or get a good night's sleep before a long journey. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains were true and unsurpassed masters of applied aerodynamics. When setting up their traditional dwellings, they always took into account the windrows of a particular area. The entrance to their spacious teepee always faced away from the prevailing icy winds. This simple and ingenious rule completely prevented cold air from entering the warm shelter. Rain and wind battered the solid back wall with fury, causing no harm to the inhabitants. Special wind valves at the very top of the cone-shaped structure allowed for very fine adjustment of the draft. These two triangular pieces of thick fabric were controlled by long, sturdy wooden poles. By moving the poles, the Indians could direct the outlet into the wind, creating the perfect exhaust effect. The smoke from the internal fire was instantly and completely sucked out, leaving the air clean. Inside the tent, it was always fresh, warm, and completely safe for sleeping people to breathe. These same valves served as reliable deflectors for heavy raindrops and wet snow. They were moved so that they completely covered the opening on the side of the approaching rain front. The water rolled smoothly down the sloping surface of the valve and ran down the outer wall of the teepee. The interior remained protected from any precipitation, even during the heaviest downpours. This flexible adjustment system made the teepee the most perfect portable dwelling in human history. The round shape of the teepee itself was an ideal aerodynamic solution for protection from storms. The wind simply curved around the smooth conical surface, encountering no strong, direct resistance in its path. The tent did not flap in the wind or deform under the pressure of powerful air masses. Its stability was enhanced by a sturdy frame made of dozens of long wooden poles tied together. This dwelling could easily withstand hurricane-force winds that would easily tear down modern rectangular tents. The inner canopy, tied to the poles at a low height, created an additional insulating layer of air. Cold air penetrating from below passed between the outer cover and this inner screen. It was heated by the warmth of the fire and rose upward, creating a constant and protective thermal curtain. People sat in a zone of absolute comfort, protected from drafts by the double wall of their tent. This ingenious ventilation system was unparalleled in the architecture of that distant historical period. To protect their huge camps from the winter winds, the Indians often used natural barriers. They set up their camps under the protection of high river cliffs or in dense forests. If the camp was set up on an open plain, the teepees were arranged in a special semicircle, enclosing the central area. The largest and most durable dwellings were placed on the windward side, taking the brunt of the elements. The tribe worked as a single, coordinated organism to ensure maximum safety for all its members. A deep understanding of the nature of wind allowed Native Americans not only to survive, but to thrive on the plains. They did not fight the air currents, but made them work for the benefit of their comfortable life. The wind fanned their fires, drew smoke from their dwellings, and dried their rain-soaked clothes. Their knowledge of the behavior of air masses saved them from freezing on cold and harsh nights. Their engineering genius was based on centuries of observation of the surrounding world and its processes. Modern designers of tourist equipment are still studying the aerodynamics of the classic Indian teepee. The cone and hemisphere shapes are recognized as the most reliable for creating high-end expedition tents. The principles of adjustable ventilation are used in the manufacture of clothing for extreme mountain climbing. Ancient peoples left us a priceless legacy, proving their ability to live in harmony with the elements. Their experience shows that the human mind is capable of finding a way out of the most difficult climatic situations. The design of traditional dwellings allowed fierce winds to smoothly bypass obstacles without creating strong eddies. Heavy raindrops were blown away by the airflow far from the main entrance. Inside, a calm atmosphere was always maintained, ideal for relaxation and long-lasting comfortable heating. People could calmly wait out storms lasting several days in absolute comfort and safety for their health. These unique engineering solutions remain incredibly relevant and effective even today. We have examined in detail the main critical mistakes people make in extreme weather conditions during nighttime downpours. The experience of the indigenous peoples of North America eloquently proves the superiority of thoughtful knowledge over instinctive panic. Correct and calm actions can preserve precious warmth even during the most severe freezing rain. Please suggest topics for future historical and survival videos that you would like to see covered in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new useful videos.